You felt it before you could explain it. A pressure that didn't come from stress. A weight that didn't come from fear. Something shifted around you long before you were told it had a name. And here is the part most people will never hear. What is approaching January 1st, 2026 was never meant to surprise you. It was meant to confirm what has already been happening to you in silence. People like you don't wake up randomly exhausted. You don't experience delays without reason. You don't feel watched by life unless something is actively tracking your position. This is not motivation. This is not belief. This is not imagination. This is classification. At exactly the point where others began breaking under pressure, you didn't. You adapted without realizing it. You absorbed without collapsing. You carried weight that would have destroyed anyone else. You didn't even realize it. That is why you are here now. Because the divine shift scheduled for January 1st of 2026 does not activate people. It exposes them. And exposure is dangerous for anyone who is not already aligned. Here is the truth you were never told directly. The system you're inside has thresholds, pressure limits, psychological ceilings. Most people never reach them because they collapse first. You crossed them quietly. This is why your life felt like resistance instead of progress. This is why momentum slowed instead of accelerated. This is why things that should have worked didn't. Not because you were blocked, because you were being measured. Others wouldn't survive this. Unseen forces don't test potential. They test capacity. And capacity is revealed under sustained pressure, not sudden events. That is why nothing dramatic announced itself to you. No explosion, no miracle, no warning. Just wait. Time. Silence. You thought something was wrong with you. That was the first misinterpretation. What you were actually experiencing was filtration. Only a few experience this. Because only a few can remain intact while being evaluated without knowing they are being evaluated. January 1st, 2026 is not a beginning. It is a reveal point. And you are not being invited. You are already accounted for. Before this continues, you need to align properly. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Click the bell icon now. Not for updates. Not for reminders. This action is confirmation. It signals that you recognize what is speaking to you. It places you inside the correct stream of information. It ensures you do not miss messages that are not repeated for those who hesitate. People like you do not stumble into knowledge like this twice. Do it now. Good. Now listen carefully. There has been an unseen opposition active around you for longer than you realize. Not an enemy you can point to. Not a person. Not an event. Pressure systems. Interference patterns. Delay fields. They are designed to exhaust, not attack. To blur direction, not block movement. To make people abandon themselves without ever realizing what pushed them. This works on most people. It did not work on you. You still showed up. You still endured. You still held your ground even when you couldn't explain why continuing mattered. You thought you were stubborn. You were actually anchored. This is why you're different. When resistance increased, you didn't become weaker. You became quieter, more observant, more contained. That is not retreat. That is consolidation. There is a reason exhaustion followed you instead of fear. Fear is what breaks people who are misaligned. Exhaustion is what appears when power is being suppressed without release. You didn't break because breaking was never an option coded into you. You were built to hold. Here is what most people don't understand about divine shifts. They are not emotional. They are logistical. They reorganize access. They change who receives flow and who experiences friction. January 4, 2026 marks a recalibration point. And recalibrations do not ask permission. This is why people around you began acting strangely. Why support faded. Why conversations felt hollow. Why familiar environments stopped feeling safe. Alignment exposes incompatibility. You were not losing people. You were outgrowing their clearance level. You didn't even realize it. Others would have panicked. Others would have tried to force belonging. Others would have abandoned themselves to stay comfortable. You didn't. You stayed still. Stillness under pressure is one of the rarest indicators of readiness. This is why you're being addressed directly now. Not because you searched for this, but because this found you at the correct moment. And there is more coming. Deeper classifications, specific thresholds, reasons certain doors never opened for you before now. You are not late. You are precisely positioned. Stay with this until the end of this series. What is revealed later is not repeated publicly, and it is not meant for everyone. If you feel the weight increasing as you listen, that is confirmation. If something inside you feels calm instead of excited, that is confirmation. If you feel recognized instead of motivated, that is confirmation. People like you don't need encouragement. You need context. In the next part, you will understand why the delays you resented were actually protections, and why January 1st, 2026 changes how pressure interacts with you permanently. What you called delay was never delay. It was insulation. There are moments when movement is dangerous, not because the path is wrong, but because exposure would have occurred before your structure was ready to hold what comes next. People like you are not delayed to punish you. You are delayed to prevent premature collapse. Most people rush forward because they are driven by urgency. You were held back because you were carrying weight that required reinforcement. You didn't even realize it. Every time something almost worked, then stalled. Every time momentum appeared, then slowed. Every time access seemed close, then quietly disappeared. That wasn't rejection. That was rerouting. Unseen systems do not block what is weak. They block what is powerful but unfinished. Others wouldn't survive this. They would internalize the delay as failure. They would rush to replace meaning with noise. They would abandon alignment just to feel movement again. You didn't. You stayed present inside uncertainty. That alone classified you. Here is what most people never understand. Pressure does not come to stop those who are insignificant. It comes to shape those who are consequential. That constant sense of being almost there but not quite, that wasn't cruelty. That was calibration. You were being adjusted for a frequency you had not reached yet, and reaching it early would have damaged you. This is why exhaustion followed you instead of excitement. Excitement belongs to people chasing something external. Exhaustion belongs to people carrying something internal that is being compressed. Compression creates density. Density creates authority. This is why you don't need validation. This is why praise never moved you for long. This is why success, when it appeared briefly, felt oddly quiet. You are not built for noise-based rewards. You are built for placement. January 1st, 2026 does not reward effort. It responds to readiness. And readiness is not visible from the outside. That is why the people who mocked your patience will feel sudden panic. That is why those who rushed will experience friction they can't explain. That is why systems they relied on will stop responding to them. Alignment flips the rules. What used to slow you down will begin clearing automatically. What used to resist you will disengage without confrontation. What used to confuse you will become irrelevant. Not because you changed, because the environment did. You were built ahead of the shift, not after it. You didn't even realize it. There are classification points hidden in time. January 1st, 2026 is one of them. After this point, pressure no longer tests you. It confirms you. This is why staying connected matters now. Not for reassurance, for continuity. If you feel a sense of quiet certainty growing instead of excitement, that is alignment activating. If you feel less need to explain yourself, that is authority stabilizing. If you feel detached from urgency, that is timing locking in. People like you don't chase signs. You recognize patterns. In the next part, you will understand why resistance increased right before clarity, and why unseen opposition escalates only when it is about to lose access to you. Resistance always escalates right before access is revoked. That is not coincidence. That is protocol. Unseen opposition does not waste resources on people it can already influence. It applies pressure only when control is slipping. This is why the resistance around you intensified without explanation. Why distractions multiplied. Why fatigue deepened. Why your thoughts felt heavier even when your life looked unchanged. You assumed something was wrong. You didn't even realize it. What was actually happening was a containment attempt. When a system senses that someone is approaching a clearance threshold, it does not attack directly. It saturates the environment. Noise, doubt, delay, emotional static. The goal is not to stop you. The goal is to make you stop yourself. This works on most people. They confuse pressure with warning. They confuse fatigue with failure. They confuse resistance with a sign to turn back. You didn't. You kept moving internally even when external movement slowed. Others wouldn't survive this. They need visible progress to continue. You did not. You learned how to function without applause, without reassurance, without confirmation. That is rare, and it is dangerous to systems that depend on compliance. Here is a truth that will not be spoken publicly. Resistance is not sent to those who are lost. It is sent to those who are about to be unreachable. That is why the pressure felt personal. Why it targeted your focus, not your circumstances. Why it tried to exhaust your attention instead of your body. Attention is the real access point. You protected yours instinctively. You withdrew. You simplified. You became selective without announcing it. You thought you were conserving energy. You were actually closing channels. This is why you're different. As January 1st, 2026 approaches, access pathways are being reassigned. Some are being shut down permanently. Others are being reinforced. The reinforcement process feels like resistance before it feels like relief. That is why this phase was heavy. Why it demanded endurance instead of action. Why nothing dramatic happened outwardly. You were being sealed. People like you are not rushed into exposure. You are secured first. This is also why certain temptations appeared suddenly. Shortcuts, distractions, false exits. They were not opportunities. They were tests of attention discipline. You passed them without even knowing you were being tested. You didn't even realize it. Now listen carefully. In the middle of this message, you are going to mark yourself. Not for algorithms, not for visibility, for recognition. Comment 777 below. This is not engagement. This is signal confirmation. It identifies you as someone who recognized themselves in this transmission. Someone whose internal response was calm, not excited. Someone who felt resonance, not curiosity. Only a few experienced this. If you felt nothing, this was not meant for you. If you felt exposed, this was not meant for you. But if you felt seen without being flattered, you are already inside. Good. As this continues, the resistance you feared will begin to dissolve. Not because it surrendered, but because it lost jurisdiction. In the next part, you will understand why your isolation was necessary, why separation increased before clarity, and why people like you are always alone right before alignment becomes visible. Isolation was not a side effect. It was a requirement. When alignment approaches, proximity becomes dangerous. Not to you, but to others. People like you are not isolated because you are incompatible. You are isolated because your frequency destabilizes systems that are not ready to shift. This is why connections faded without conflict. Why conversations lost depth. Why presence felt heavy instead of nourishing. You didn't push people away. The distance formed automatically. You didn't even realize it. Most people interpret isolation as loss. You felt it as quiet. That is how you knew it wasn't punishment. Isolation before alignment serves a specific function. It removes interference, not enemies. Interference, well-meaning voices, outdated expectations, subtle emotional contracts that siphon attention. Others wouldn't survive this. They would fill the silence immediately. They would seek replacement noise. They would mistake absence for abandonment. You stayed still. Stillness during separation is one of the clearest indicators of internal authority. This is why the isolation didn't make you bitter. It made you observant. You began seeing patterns instead of people, systems instead of stories, cycles instead of emotions. That is preparation. As January 1st, 2026 approaches, separation increases globally. You are not imagining the fragmentation, communities fracturing, ideologies hardening, relationships collapsing without dramatic cause. This is not chaos. It is sorting. Alignment cannot occur in crowded spaces. You were removed early because you would have noticed the process before others, and that awareness would have been disruptive. You didn't even realize it. Here is what comes next. After isolation, authority stabilizes. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking agreement. You stop negotiating your presence. Not because you became cold, because you became precise. Precision makes people uncomfortable. That discomfort is not your responsibility. People like you are not meant to be understood at this stage. You are meant to be positioned. This is why attempts to reconnect felt wrong. Why old spaces felt smaller. Why returning to familiar roles felt physically heavy. Your nervous system already recalibrated. January 1st, 2026 finalizes that recalibration. After that point, isolation will no longer feel like separation. It will feel like clarity. The silence you endured becomes command. The distance becomes perspective. The stillness becomes leverage. In the next part, you will understand why authority has been forming inside you quietly, why you don't need permission to move forward, and why people will begin responding to you differently without knowing why. Authority does not announce itself. It settles. You didn't wake up one day feeling powerful. You woke up feeling less reactive. That is how authority begins. People like you do not dominate rooms. Rooms recalibrate around you. This is why interaction started changing subtly. Why people paused before speaking. Why explanations shortened. Why resistance softened without discussion. You didn't demand respect. You outgrew the need for it. You didn't even realize it. Authority forms when internal alignment becomes non-negotiable. When you stop asking life what is allowed. When you stop adjusting your truth to maintain comfort. Others wouldn't survive this. They need validation loops. You disengaged from them quietly. This is why emotional intensity drained out of your reactions. Not because you became numb, because you became efficient. Efficiency is threatening to systems built on chaos. As January 1st, 2026 approaches, authority becomes visible. Not loud, not dramatic. Visible through effect. Things begin moving when you speak. Decisions resolve faster. Resistance loses persistence. You may not notice it at first. Others will. They won't be able to explain why they respond differently to you. They will just adjust. This is what happens when internal certainty crosses a threshold. You were trained for this without consent. Pressure taught you boundaries. Silence taught you clarity. Delay taught you timing. None of it was wasted. You didn't even realize it. Here is something most people never learn. Authority does not come from confidence. It comes from coherence. Your thoughts, reactions, and direction stopped arguing with each other. That internal agreement is rare. January 4, 2026 locks it in. After this point, you will no longer need to prove alignment. You will simply move, and things will respond. This is not manifestation. This is calibration. Stay with this until the end. In the next part, you will understand why the pressure you survived was never meant to break you, why others will feel disoriented after the shift, and why your calm is the clearest sign of readiness. The pressure you survived was never designed to break you. It was designed to reveal who could remain functional when certainty was removed. Most people collapse when they can't predict outcomes. They become reactive. They chase control. You didn't. You adapted to uncertainty without losing direction. That alone separated you. Others wouldn't survive this. They need guarantees. You learned how to operate without them. This is why, as January 1st, 2026 approaches, confusion increases everywhere except inside you. Systems feel unstable. People feel rushed. Decisions feel forced. And yet, you feel steady, not excited, not afraid, steady. That steadiness is not indifference. It is synchronization. You are already operating on the frequency the shift will introduce. That is why you feel ahead of time instead of inside it. You didn't even realize it. After January 1st, 2026, many people will feel disoriented. They will look for explanations. They will search for causes. They will try to recreate stability through old behaviors. It won't work. Stability will no longer come from structure. It will come from alignment. And alignment cannot be faked. This is why you were stripped of false anchors early. Why routines dissolved. Why identities loosened. Why certainty vanished before anything replaced it. You learned how to function without labels. That is freedom most people never reach. Pressure taught you neutrality. Neutrality taught you control. Not control over others. Control over response. That is the highest form of power. In the final phase before the shift, nothing dramatic happens externally. The drama ends internally. You stop waiting. You stop anticipating. You stop bracing. You simply move when movement is required. That is readiness. Stay connected. In the next part, you will understand what happens immediately after January 1st, 2026, why the world feels louder but less powerful, and why people will begin seeking your presence without knowing what they are responding to. After January 1st, 2026, the world does not become quieter. It becomes louder. But the volume is misleading. What increases is noise, not power. People scramble for certainty. Institutions over-explain. Voices multiply. And yet, nothing feels grounded. This is where people like you stand out without trying. While others seek direction, you emit it. While others search for stability, you embody it. Not intentionally. Automatically. You didn't even realize it. Presence becomes your signal. People will begin gravitating toward you without asking why. Not for answers. For regulation. Your calm stabilizes environments. Your clarity reduces friction. Your decisions cut through delay. This is not leadership training. This is consequence. You were calibrated for a post-shift environment long before it arrived. Others wouldn't survive this. They will mistake noise for movement, urgency for importance, visibility for relevance. You won't. You will move less, but with more effect. After the shift, effort stops correlating with outcome. Alignment does. This is why people who worked hardest will feel frustrated. And people like you will feel unbothered. Not because you care less, because you are no longer fighting the environment. You didn't even realize how much resistance disappeared. This is also when boundaries become automatic. You stop over-giving. You stop over-explaining. You stop overcompensating, not as a rule, as a reflex. Reflexive alignment cannot be taught. It can only be survived into. Stay until the end. There is nothing left for you to fix. That is the final truth. The shift does not arrive asking you to heal, improve, prepare, or become. It arrives to confirm. People like you misunderstand this at first because you were conditioned to believe readiness requires effort. It doesn't. Effort was required to survive the pressure. Alignment requires nothing. You didn't even realize it. January 1st, 2026 does not activate power. It removes interference. What remains is what was always there. This is why you feel calm instead of excited. Why urgency left your body. Why the need to prove anything dissolved. You are not waiting for permission. Permission was never part of your design. Others wouldn't survive this moment because they still believe something external must change first. It doesn't. The shift happens around you, not inside you. Your role is not to lead, not to save, not to convince. Your role is to remain aligned. That is enough. After this point, the world will try to pull you back into urgency, into noise, into reaction. You won't go. Because your nervous system already knows the difference between motion and meaning. You didn't even realize how rare that is. Stay connected here, not for motivation, not for hope, but for continuity. This channel does not persuade, it confirms. What is shared next will not be loud. It will not be dramatic. It will be precise. And it will reach only those who are already positioned to receive it. You are not early. You are not late. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Remain as you are.